On January 18, 1981, the body of 20-year-old Rachel Zendejas was found by two newspaper delivery boys in the carport area of an apartment complex in the 700 block of Mobile Avenue in Camarillo, California. Rachel's body was across the street from the apartment building where she resided. Rachel had been strangled to death by an unknown suspect. Investigators believe her murder is connected to the 1981 murder of Lisa Gondek, which occurred in Oxnard, California, just 15 minutes north of Camarillo, California. The night before her murder, she went out with friends and family to watch her brother play in a band. Afterwards, she went to a Huntington's nightclub in Oxnard while her sister went to their shared apartment in Camarillo. This is where I'm confused as to who she lived with at the time of her murder. Did she live with a brother or a sister, and whether it was her brother's band or her friend's band, as stated in a different article. Also at the apartment that night was Rachel's babysitter, who was watching her two young daughters. After returning home from the nightclub, they discussed the possibility of the babysitter spending the night, but ultimately decided against. At this point, Rachel lets her sister or brother know that she is going to take the babysitter home. After dropping off the babysitter, she arrives back and parks her car at the carport across the street from her apartment on Mobile Avenue in Camarillo, California. This source states she lived with her sister, but in another it says it was her brother who she lived with and shared an apartment with. Rachel Rodriguez Zendejas was a happy young mother of two who had only wanted to see her children grow up. In an article, her brother stated, "We were sharing a 2-bedroom apartment, and she and her two daughters, 1 and 2 years old," remembers her brother Roy Rodriguez. When Rachel, at the age of 20, failed to return home to her Camarillo apartment after seeing a friend's band perform in Oxnard, the following morning, Rodriguez telephoned police to report her missing. Unbeknownst to him, his sister did make it home. However, she did not make it into her apartment. The police had arrived and were already outside investigating the unthinkable. This article is where I'm led to believe she lived with her brother and not her sister. Now on to my second case. On December 12, 1981, 11 months after Rachel's murder, another young woman by the name of Lisa Gondek was also strangled and raped. Her body was left in the tub of her apartment, posed in an erotic manner. The apartment was then set on fire. It would be almost 30 years later before these two cases were linked together by DNA, revealing that both Lisa and Rachel were killed by the same person. Both cases remain unsolved. However, because the DNA does not match any known offender in the system. Back in 1981, DNA samples were not required. Aside from DNA, both women had attended Huntington's nightclub in Oxnard, California, hours before they were killed. Lisa Gondek, age 21, had recently moved from Connecticut to her Oxnard apartment when she was found deceased in the bathtub of her apartment. Detectives were able to retrieve DNA from a bite mark on Gondek's cheek. Dental records and DNA pulled nothing useful from a criminal database. In a local Ventura County article of December 2nd, 2017, interviewed Lisa's mom, Gloria Maynard. It read, 3 dozen Christmases ago, Gloria Maynard was like most parents at this time of year. She waited at the bus station for her grown child to come home for the holidays. The difference is, Maynard knew in her head what her heart was unready to accept. Her 20-year-old daughter, Lisa Gondek, would never step off the Greyhound. She was murdered on December 12, 1981, in her Oxnard apartment after a night of dancing at the old Huntington's nightclub near Wagon Wheel Junction. And even though Lisa was in her grave, Maynard waited at the station in a mother's desperate hope her only daughter somehow would keep her promise to spend Christmas with the family. Only decades later would Maynard learn that hers wasn't the only family grieving the loss of a child taken from the same killer. 11 months earlier, on January 18, 1981, Rachel Zendejas was murdered outside the Camarillo apartment she shared with her 2 young daughters and her brother. She also had been at Huntington's at closing time the night she died. Their murders were investigated by different police agencies, so the Huntington's connection was only made a dozen years ago, after DNA evidence linked the homicides. Their killer has yet to be identified. His genetic profile does not match a known criminal in the national database. Now in her late 70s, Maynard has assembled a loyal posse who she shares her fervent quest to bring justice to the man who strangled Lisa and posed her erotically in the bathtub before he left and set the place on fire and apparently pocketed her driver's license. Maynard, who lived in Connecticut at the time of Lisa's killing, sought help from her then Senator Lowell Wicker in getting the crime solved after more than 3 decades. Wicker's now retired executive aide Richard Benson stays on this case. Because Maynard hears money is limited to investigate this cold case, Benson recruited a retired lawman willing to work it for free. So far, local agencies have resisted his offer of assistance, a source of frustration to Maynard and Benson. All concerned agree on one thing. The key to finding this killer is in the Huntington's connection, and that's where the public can help.